Hey Electronauts, welcome back to MCL tutorial number 2. Here we're going to talk about basic grid functionality. What's the concept of the grid, how we can save data to the grid or load data here. This basically corresponds of how to save different kits and different patterns. So let's have a closer look. The grid is the brain of each and every project. There are two different grids, a so-called X grid where MD sequencer grids are stored, and in addition to that a Y grid where data of external MIDI tracks can be stored. So here in this tutorial we just focus on the X grid of the machine drum. So how is a grid organized? Here you can see that we have different columns which are corresponding to different machine drum instruments, the so-called slots, and in addition to that we have the rows which corresponds to patterns and in addition to kits. So this means that in each row different sequencer data can be stored that can sound differently. So in a row you have the sequenced data in addition to different sound options. So how does the grid interact with the machine drum? Let's have a look at this scheme. So here you can see the basics we already covered in tutorial number 1. Use the machine drum, load a kit, tweak your sounds, place tricks, conditional tricks, and so on. In order to save your data you just programmed, you have to save it onto the MCL grid. That's the top line you can see here. So while saving data to grid, this means that you save sound information and also sequence data onto the grid. Data from the grid can be recalled into the MCL sequencer. So the MCL sequencer is basically your mediator between the grid and the machine drum. Okay, this really sounds complicated, but you will see that it's much easier in reality if we have a look at this example here. So let's see how we can apply this grid concept in a practical context. So as you can hear, no pattern is loaded. What we do first is to choose a kit. We can load here, I just take this E12 kit and start to place around some tricks here. I can also apply my conditional tricks, as you can see here, and so on. So, and while doing so, and when I stop the sequencer, the grid itself is completely empty. And what you have to do now is to go on save and press the second function. And here you see the group has been saved. This means the entire track has been saved to the grid. It's also possible to select specific instruments and to save them separately. But for me it's more reasonable to save the entire track. And as you can see here, now the data has been written to the grid and saved to the grid. So while this track here is running, next thing we could do is to change to a different row. So let's stop the sequencer. Let's use encoder number 2 to navigate to the second row. If you know load this row, load groups, you hear there's nothing. Not surprising at all, because you see nothing is here stored on the grid. And what you can do now is we can change the kit we currently have. Go to load. Let's move to Francisco, for example, here. And now we can start to fill this row here as well. And again, so the flashing line indicates we are in row number 2, and in order to store the data we have programmed so far to the grid, we again go to save and second here, save groups, and you see here the information is written onto the grid. What you can do now, and I guess that's the reason why this fantastic unit is called Mega Command Live, you can again go to row number 1, you can press load the group, and you're back to the other pattern. So having this grid option where you can store completely different sequences and different sounds as well, you have a fantastic opportunity to change your patterns during a live performance. So as you see, data is written to the grid, and now let's see what happens if we turn off our unit. So after rebooting the unit, you see that we are back in our project. We have the data written onto the grid. And what surprised me in the very beginning was when I was now starting the pattern, and you see that here a clock is transmitted, you don't hear anything at all. So here all you have to know is that you have to reload your information from the MCL grid back to the MCL sequencer. And this could be done just by pushing load, second or shift. Your groups are loaded, and now, as you can hear the sound, and you can also navigate back . So that's all from me for now. Thank you for watching, and see you then.